You have been told your whole life that you are an overthinker, that something in your brain is wired a little too tight. You have read the articles, you have tried the breathing exercises, you have downloaded the apps, listened to the podcasts, journaled before bed. And maybe it works for an hour, maybe it works for a day, but then your boss sends you a 5-word text. Can we talk tomorrow? And within 90 seconds, your mind has already drafted your termination letter. You have rehearsed the conversation. You have imagined telling your partner. You have calculated how long your savings will last. You have written a future that does not exist. And your body is responding as if it already happened. Your chest is tight. Your jaw is clenched. All from 5 words on a screen. And every self-help book in the world tells you the same thing. Slow down, breathe. Think positive. Be present, as if you have not been trying to do that your entire life. As if the problem is that you just have not tried hard enough. But what if the problem is not effort? What if it is diagnosis? 2,500 years ago, a man in northern India looked at this exact pattern. The way the human mind takes one small input and spins it into an entire catastrophe. And he did not call it anxiety. He did not call it a personality flaw. He gave it a name. He mapped the exact chain of events that starts every spiral, and he identified the precise moment in that chain where you can stop it. The word he used was papañca. Say it like papañca. Every English translation says overthinking, but that is not what the word means. Overthinking implies speed. Your mind is going too fast. Papañca means proliferation. Your mind is not going too fast. It is multiplying. 1 thought becomes 3, 3 become 12. 12 become a catastrophe. It is not a speed problem. It is a volume problem, and that single distinction changes everything about how you fix it. In 2001, a neuroscientist at Washington University accidentally discovered something in the brain that the Buddha had described without a scanner, without a lab, without even a word for neuroscience. We will get to that discovery. But first, you need to understand the chain, because the chain is where the cure lives. The teaching comes from a sutta called the Madhupingthika, the honey ball, and the way it was delivered is almost as interesting as what it contains. The Buddha was staying near Kapilavatthu, the city where he had grown up as a prince. A combative Brahmin named Dandapani approached him. The name literally means stick in hand, and asked him, point blank, what do you teach? The Buddha gave a compressed, almost cryptic answer. He said, I teach in such a way that a person is not beset by proliferations of perception. Dandapani shook his head, clicked his tongue, raised his eyebrows, and walked away with his stick. He had no idea what that meant. Later that evening, the Buddha repeated the same compressed statement to his monks, and they did not understand it either. So after the Buddha left, they went to the one disciple known for laying out difficult teachings, a monk named Mahakaccana. In the entire Sangha, Kaccana was recognized as the foremost in elaborating brief statements. The Buddha himself had given him that title. So the monks asked him, what did the teacher mean? And Kakana laid out a chain, step by step, with a precision that sounds less like ancient philosophy and more like a circuit diagram. He said, take your eye and a visible form. When the two meet with consciousness, that meeting is called contact. Contact is the ping. With contact as condition, there is feeling, vedana. Not emotion, just a bare tone. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, a flash so fast you barely register it. Then, what one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. And what one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. That is the chain. Contact feeling, perception thinking proliferation. 5 links. And the last one, proliferation, is where your mind takes a 5-word text message and builds a 200-message catastrophe. Kakana was describing exactly what happened to you when your boss wrote, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Your eye met the screen. Contact, a flash of unpleasant feeling. Your mind labeled it threat. Perception, you started reasoning. Why would he say that? What did I do wrong? Was it the report? Thinking. And then the multiplication began. The resignation letter, the savings calculation, the conversation with your partner, proliferation. When the monks reported Kakana's explanation to the Buddha, he said something remarkable. He said, had you asked me, I would have explained it in exactly the same way. Kakana got it perfectly, and Ananda, the Buddha's personal attendant, was so moved by the teaching that he said it was like tasting a honey ball, sweet at every layer. That is how the sutta got its name. And here is what makes this strange. In 2001, a neurologist named Marcus Reichla was running brain scans at Washington University. In St. Louis, he was not studying Buddhism. He was not studying overthinking. He was studying how the brain performs tasks, reading words, solving problems, remembering faces. Standard neuroscience? But every experiment had a control condition. You put someone in the scanner. You ask them to rest, just lie still. Do nothing. And you measure the baseline. Then you compare. Reichla kept noticing something in the baseline that nobody could explain. The same regions of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate, the medial temporal lobe, fired up during rest. Every time the brain was not resting, it was doing something. It was generating stories, rehearsing futures, replaying pasts, building simulations of conversations that had not happened yet, automatically, without instruction, without permission. Reichla published his findings in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. He called it the default mode network, the brain setting when no one is driving. And what it does, what it has always done, is proliferate. We will come back to what happened when another scientist put meditators inside those same scanners. But for now, understand this. A man 2,500 years ago, sitting under trees in northern India, mapped a process that a neurologist in Missouri confirmed with a machine. The chain Kakana described and the network Reichla discovered are doing the same thing. They are taking contact, taking feeling, and multiplying The question is, where do you stop it? The chain I just showed you is the diagnosis. 5 links: contact, feeling perception, thinking proliferation. Most people never see the chain. They only feel the last link. The spiral, the 200 messages, the catastrophe that was never real. But the Buddha did not stop at diagnosis. He found the exact point in the chain where you can interrupt it. And it is not where you expect. It is not at the level of thoughts. It is not at the level of stories. It is at a level so fast, so subtle, that you have been walking past it your entire life without noticing it exists. And it lasts about half a second. If you leave now, you will understand why you overthink. But you will miss the one move that actually stops it, and that one move is what separates the Buddha's teaching from every productivity, hack and breathing exercise you have ever tried. If this is changing how you see your own mind, hit subscribe. Every video on this channel is built to show you what the Buddha actually said, not what people assume he said. Look at Kakana's chain again. Contact, feeling, perception, thinking, proliferation. Most people try to fix the problem at step 4 or 5. They try to change their thoughts, reframe the story, argue with the spiral. That is like trying to stop a flood by arguing with the water. The Buddha said, go upstream. Find where the water enters. And the water enters at step 2. The Pali word is Vedana. Say it like Vedayachna. Every English translation says feeling. And when you hear that, you think emotion, sadness, anger, fear. But Vedana is not emotion. It is something much faster and much simpler. It is the bare tone of any experience. Pleasant, unpleasant. That is it. 3 options, and it happens in a fraction of a second. Before you have a thought, before you have a story, before you have a spiral. It is the flash between contact and everything that follows. Think about that 5-word text again. Can we talk tomorrow? Your eye hits the screen, contact, and before any thought forms, before any word appears in your mind, there is a flash, a microsensation, unpleasant, not a thought, not a story, just a tone, like a color your body registers before your brain has time to name it. That flash is Vedana. And the Buddha said, that is where you intervene, not at the level of the story. At the level of the tone. You have probably heard a version of this idea before, without knowing where it came from. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, wrote one of the most quoted sentences of the 20th century. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our freedom. Frankl found that space in a concentration camp, in the worst place on earth. The Buddha found it 2,500 years earlier, sitting beneath trees in northern India. And he gave it a name, Vedana, the gap between the ping and the first reply. Now let me show you what this looks like. Not in a monastery, not in a sutta, not in a laboratory. In your life right now. Imagine your mind is a group chat, not a calm one, the kind with too many people who all have opinions and none of them sleep. A single message arrives, just a notification, a ping that is contact. The ping has a tone, pleasant, unpleasant or neutral. That is Vedana. Now, in a well-managed group chat, someone reads the message, notes the tone, and moves on. Maybe sends a thumbs up. End of conversation. But that is not your group chat. In your group chat, the moment that ping arrives with an unpleasant tone, someone starts typing. Before anyone asked them to, before anyone needed them to, they just react, and then someone else sees the typing indicator and responds with a theory. Then a third voice jumps in to catastrophize. Then the first person sees the catastrophe and spirals further. Within 90 seconds, the group chat has 200 messages, 3 conspiracy theories, and someone is threatening to leave the group entirely. Nobody requested this. Nobody planned it. It just proliferated. That is papañca. Plus, that is what your mind does between the time your boss sends, "Can we talk tomorrow?" and the time you have mentally resigned, calculated your severance, and imagined the look on your mother's face when you tell her the Buddha's instruction is not delete the group chat. You cannot stop contact from happening. You have eyes. Ears a phone, a world. His instruction is not mute notifications. Suppression does not work, and he tried it himself during 6 years of extreme asceticism, before realizing it was a dead end. His instruction is simpler and stranger than both. Notice the ping. Notice its tone. And do not type the first reply. Because the first reply is where the 200 messages begin. Every spiral you have ever had started with 1 ping and 1 reply. You did not notice yourself typing. We have seen the chain. We have found the gap, and we have seen what it looks like in your daily life. Not as ancient philosophy, but as something happening in your nervous system right now. Now, the question is, does the science agree? Did the Buddha get it right? In the late 1990s, Marcus Reichle had a problem. He was a neurologist at Washington University in St. Louis, one of the best brain imaging labs in the world. And his control conditions kept misbehaving. Here is how brain imaging worked at the time. You slide someone into a scanner. You give them a task. Read this word. Remember this face. Solve this equation. You measure which brain regions light up, then you compare that to a baseline, the resting condition, where you ask the person to just lie still and do nothing. The task minus the rest should equal the work. Clean subtraction, simple science, but Reichle kept seeing something in the rest condition that should not have been there. A constellation of brain regions: medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate, medial temporal lobe, that fired up every single time a person stopped focusing on a task. Not randomly, the same regions, the same pattern. In subject after subject after subject, the brain was not resting. The moment it had nothing to do, it started doing something very specific. It started building, simulating conversations, replaying yesterday, rehearsing tomorrow, constructing versions of you in situations that had not happened yet and might never happen. Automatically, relentlessly, without anyone asking it to. In 2001, Reichle published his findings. He called it the default mode network, the brain's factory setting. And its primary product is self-referential thought. Stories about you, projected into the past and the future, generated on autopilot. Read that again. Contact with the world triggers a self-referential network that generates stories, projects them across time, and runs without conscious instruction. That is not a summary of Reichl's paper. That is Kakana's chain, contact feeling, perception thinking, proliferation, described 2,500 years apart. One in poly, one in fMRI. But here is where it comes together. A decade after Reichl named the network, a psychiatrist named Judson Brewer at Yale University asked a different question. If the default mode network is the brain's overthinking engine, can anything turn it down? Brewer put experienced meditators, people who had practiced in the Theravada tradition, the same tradition that preserved the Honeyball Sutta, into the same scanners. And he compared their brain activity to people who had never meditated. The results published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2011 were striking. During meditation, the meditators showed significantly reduced activity in the default mode network, not just compared to rest, compared to other active cognitive tasks. Their brains were not just quieter. The specific network responsible for self-referential proliferation was turning down. The practice the Buddha prescribed, sati, bear attention to what is actually happening right now, does at the neural level exactly what the Honeyball Sutta described at the experiential level. It interrupts the chain, not at thinking, not at the stories, at the gap, at Vedana. It catches the tone before the first reply gets typed. And when you catch it, when you notice, unpleasant without typing a response, the group chat stays quiet. The 200 messages never get written. The resignation letter, the savings calculation, the look on your mother's face. None of it proliferates. You are not broken. You were never broken. You have a default mode network that is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Scanning for threats as simulating futures, protecting you by imagining worst-case scenarios. It is the most sophisticated prediction engine on Earth. And for 200,000 years of human evolution, it kept your ancestors alive. The problem is not the network. The problem is that no one taught you where the off switch is. The Buddha found it. He called it Vedana. And 2,500 years later, a scanner at Yale confirmed the switch works. So here is what the Buddha actually said about overthinking, not the pop culture version, not the just meditate version. The real teaching. First, overthinking is not a flaw. It is a process. The Buddha called it papañca, mental proliferation. It follows a specific chain. Contact triggers feeling. Feeling triggers perception. Perception triggers thinking. Thinking triggers proliferation. It is not random. It is not chaos. It is a sequence. And sequences can be interrupted. Second, the interruption point is not where you have been looking. You have been trying to fix your thoughts. The Buddha said, go upstream. Go to Vedana, the bare tone of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that flashes for half a second. before any thought forms. You do not need to stop the spiral. You need to notice the tone. Before the spiral starts, that is what mindfulness actually trains. Not calm, not relaxation. Precision. The ability to feel the ping without typing the first reply. Third, and this is the part I want you to sit with. You are not an overthinker. You never were. That word, overthinker, is a label you picked up somewhere along the way, and you have been wearing it like it is your name. But the Buddha looked at the same mind you have, the same spiraling, multiplying, catastrophizing mind, and he did not see a broken person. He saw a process running without supervision. You are not a person who thinks too much. You are a person who has never been shown where the chain starts. Now you have. The chain has a gap. The gap is half a second long, and for the first time in your life, you know it is there. I want to hear from you. What is the one message, the text, the email, the sentence from someone you love that sent your mind into a 200-message spiral? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. If this changed something for you, there is a video on this channel about what the Buddha actually meant by mindfulness. Not the app version, not the corporate retreat version, the real practice. It goes deeper into how you train yourself to catch that half-second gap. I will link it here. The Buddha did not say, stop thinking. He said, stop multiplying. There is a difference, and now you know it.